This call is now being recorded.
Good morning, one and all. This is
Very
Paramashwam.
Morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
good
Vidya,
morning,
welcome to
sir.
class.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Good
ma'am.
morning.
Good morning, participants. I would like to introduce our resource person for this session. Dr. M.E. Paramashivam is currently working as the assistant professor in the Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering of Sona College of Technology, Salem, and also a full-time research scholar team member of Sona Signal and Image Processing Research Center called as Sona CyPro. He also heads the international affairs at Sona College of Technology. He was also the honorary secretary of IETE Salem Subcenter. He completed his bachelor's in electronics and communication engineering in the year 2005 and then was selected for pursuing his advanced postgraduate diploma in VLSI design at Semiconductor Complex Limited, Chandigarh, the nation's only semiconductor IC manufacturing facility under the Ministry of Defense. He has also completed his master's in engineering with specialization in VLSI design in the year 2010 and master's in business administration and human resource management in the same year. He completed his PhD in 2018 under the guidance of Dr. Sabinian in the information and communication discipline. His PhD was on character recognition from Tamil palm leaf manuscripts using machine learning approaches. On a whole, to his credit till date, he has completed one bachelor's and doctoral degree, each two master's degree, three postgraduate diplomas, and three diplomas till date. He has published a number of papers in the national and international journals and conferences. A staunch lover of Indian tradition, he loves traveling a lot around globe to study the culture and tradition of the Mother Nature. In 2018, he received the Best Faculty Award Junior category from Nehru Group of Institution amongst 3 states. In 2019, he received the UP Government National Award for outstanding work done in specific area of engineering and technology college level from ISTE. He also received the Outstanding Professional Award from BVK Group of Companies during the 6th Annual Saurashtrian Achievers Award 2019 at Madurai. His areas of interest include design of algorithms for image processing, texture image classification, texture analysis, deep learning, machine learning, and management principles in ancient scriptures. So once again, we welcome you, sir. Now you can start the session.
Thank you, Professor Vidya. First
Thank
of
you,
all,
sir.
I would like to apologize for being a bit late to the session because I was a bit held up with some other daily routines, and that is why I was a bit late to the session. I apologize to all the participants in this regard, and I thank also the HOD of Sri Krishna College of Engineering and Technology, and also other personalities who are behind this faculty development program, which is being held today. I thank the Department of Electronics and Communication at Sri Krishna College of Engineering for identifying me as one of the resource persons for today's morning session. I hope that my screen is visible to most of you. And of course, my career, as Professor Vidya had told, was started with electronics and communication. Then I moved to VLSI, and then I did my PhD in image processing. And today I'm in deep learning. So before I start the session, I would request somebody to please let me know if the screen is visible, because
Yes, sir. Visible, sir.
okay, thank you, ma'am.
Visible, sir, visible.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And okay. Somebody can tell me before I start the session, what did you learn in the past 3 months when we were at home? Anybody can answer. This is a very, very simple question. I did not want to start bombarding with the technical stuff in the beginning, and that's why I wanted to make you recall what we did since March, if I'm correct. Since lockdown 1.0 started, what did we do at home? Of course, some of us were given work from home. Some of us did the work. Some of us spent time with family more. Some of us were frustrated because we were not paid properly. There were a lot many things that happened. But one thing that we should always keep in mind is we are all teachers. Most of us are teachers, and our learning never stops. Our learning continues till the day we breathe our last breath. So we cannot avoid learning. And with that focus only, we have the Government of India organizing such faculty development programs, wherein we have an opportunity to learn what the new technology is. Even the new education policy that has been proposed right now has a lot of options in which teachers can upgrade their skills as a reward of which there are many factors which are to be revealed. Nobody spoke about it because people were focused much about various other factors like language and other aspects, but very few saw that particular part of the national education policy wherein each teacher is rewarded on a national basis for getting themselves equipped. So learning is a part of life and you cannot avoid learning. And we started learning right from the day we were born. We first started learning to breathe. Then after a few days, then we started learn how to see. We learned how to see, and then we, of course, the day we were born, we learned how to eat or fill our belly. So learning is a part of life. You cannot avoid it. Today it is deep learning. Tomorrow, if there is one more new topic, again we have to learn and we have to understand what is the new technology that is available. It's not only in technology, all the aspects of life. Anyway, I just wanted to give a very brief introduction on this. I know I have already taken up 20 minutes of my time. So let me quickly start on what my topic is today. The topic that was given to me today is machine learning from mathematics to Google. The moment we see this, the moment we see this term mathematics, we all get frustrated. The moment we see this term mathematics, most of us get frustrated. But when we see this term, hey Google, we all are so happy because we have all experimented it in our Android phones. And those who use an Apple phone have already experimented, hey Siri. Okay. So when we look at the application, it is so good. But when we look at how it was brought in, it is very bitter. That is how it is always. When we start learning how we were born, it is always very difficult to understand. We don't appreciate the efforts of our parents. Sometimes we criticize them. You should have done this way. You should have done that. But today, when we are sitting in a very good position and when we are enjoying all these benefits, like hey Google, we always are happy with it. Okay, right. So one important thing that I wanted to start with before I take up with machine learning is we must be very clear of what a traditional machine learning approach is and what is a deep learning approach. To make you very quickly understand, let me put it this way. You have a small kid at your home. So what do? You start teaching the kid. You start teaching A for apple, B for boy, C for cat. And then of course, the kid says it in a very childish slang. A for apple, B for boy, C for cat. You start enjoying it. You never criticize the child. Hey, no, you are saying wrong. No, you don't do it. So that kind of approach is what you call it as the traditional machine learning approach, wherein you have an input, you extract some features, and then the classification is done, and then the output is given as either or not at all. Whereas right now, if I start taking the class in this particular session, A for apple, B for boy, you will all get frustrated. You will immediately write to the coordinator of the program and ask, what nonsense is this person taking? Okay, so I have to just give you a hint. This is what I want. This is what is deep learning, or this is what is machine learning. Then automatically given an input, immediately you will start understanding that that is the output. Okay, now let me give you a simple example. Suppose you do not know how Africa was. Some of you would have not traveled to Africa. I had an opportunity to travel to Africa. So you do not know how Africa was. So I just give you a hint. Africa is a very, very beautiful place. Yes, it's truly a beautiful place. And you get all your fruits, all your vegetables, all these things in a very, very natural way. They don't use fertilizers. Now this just is a small hint. Now after this session, if this is in your brain, what will you do? You will immediately go back, search in the net whether whatever I've told is correct, and then it slowly kindles you. You do a back propagation. And then again you try to recollect whatever I have told, and then you start working on it. So this approach is what you call as deep learning. So incidentally, we are all in deep learning right now. We know some previous knowledge about what we are talking, and so with that small hint, we use the technology, we use all that facility that is available, library, etc., etc. And of course, human knowledge too. You go and ask somebody else, you go and ask your friends, you go and ask your seniors, and then they give you knowledge. With that knowledge, you start understanding, and it is like almost replicating a matured human brain. So with today's topic, we are going to talk only about machine learning. Of course, I'm not going to talk about deep learning, which is not a part of my topic. So let us start with machine learning. What is machine learning is mainly important. I think you know what I've given you, what is the difference between machine learning and deep learning. And of course, at the end of this session, I will be telling you what ML and DL can do and cannot do. Of course, that is equally important. And before I start the entire session, before I start talking about deep learning and machine learning, I would like to keep one important point or hypothesis or thesis or postulate, whatever you call it. I strongly believe in this, that there is no replacement of the human brain. People can talk a lot, people can talk about technology, but we should always keep one point in mind, which means that you cannot replace human brain with a simple machine that has enormous capacity. Just imagine, you have the capability of storing almost all the information that you had right from 4th standard, 5th standard, till to what you are right now. You have lot of information, terabytes of information. So can you replace all these terabytes of information on a machine? No, that is not possible. So I would like to emphasize that human brain cannot be replaced. There is no replacement of human brain. Somebody can say this is a hypothesis. There is no proof for it, but still, even then, I believe in this hypothesis. Right. Thank you. Right. I've just given a Wikipedia. I've just given a Wikipedia explanation of what machine learning is. Of course, you have different terms for machine learning like artificial intelligence, machine intelligence, many such terminologies are given. But all these are basically focused into what we basically want the machine to understand what we are talking. That is the main idea. What we talk, the machine should understand, and the machine should respond to what we ask. That
Sir, excuse me, sir, it's not audible. Sir, can you check at your end? It's not audible.
Yeah, I think there was a network problem. I just quit and came back. Now, am I audible now?
Yeah. Now it is audible, sir.
Thank you, sir. And suppose I need to present the thing. And I hope the screen is also visible. Yeah. So I would focus on this particular scientist because he has done a lot of work on artificial intelligence long back, about a decade ago when it started up, and he did a lot of work on pattern recognition. And anybody who wants to understand pattern recognition should go through his book on pattern recognition by Christopher M. Bishop. So I think these are all just academically stuff. I would enter into what is more important and what is required for machine learning. So this we call it a chain of machine learning. It starts from here and it ends over here. Okay. So the first step that you do is you define the objective, and then you start with. Oh, sorry, I did the other way. It starts from here and it ends over here. And it first starts with defining the objective, and then with the data gathering, and then preparing the data, and then data exploration, building the model evaluation, and prediction. So I will be talking much about all these things, and each area is very potential. I think most of us work only in the area of prediction, model evaluation, building a model. Very few of us work on this area of data gathering, data preparation, and data exploration. Both are equally important and equally weighted. But I do not know. In day-to-day life, we only look at this one rather than looking at this one. but both are equally weighted. Right. Yeah, this is another important. Why do you want machine learning? We require machine learning because we are always in the mode of predicting the past. This is a universal idea or universal psychology of anybody to know what will happen in the past. Let us take today's scenario. We want to know when Corona will end out. So what do? We talk to statistical people, we talk to doctors, we talk to politicians, we talk to administrators. Statistical institutes give you something like this. They draw a wave. They tell you this is the first wave, this is the second wave, third wave will be like this, and fourth wave will go. And then you go to administrators and talk. They say this is your first lockdown, this is your second unlock, this is your third unlock, and this is your fourth unlock. You go and say to speak to doctors. Doctors will say, here your herd immunity will be less. Here your herd immunity will be more, and then here your total herd immunity will be maximum. I think you understand all the terminology because we have been listening to all these terminologies for the past 3 to 4 months. So we want to know what is going to happen in the past. So we are trying. We do not know. So we want to try with the machine. We want to try and check whether the machine can tell what will happen in the future. Sorry, what will happen in the future based on the past. All right. Okay. This is almost the same stuff that I have given it in the pictorial form. Let me add some more to this. You have something called Kaggle. I think most of you should have heard of this. Whoever is in machine learning should have heard of this topic called, this term called Kaggle. This is a website which basically gives you data sets. Of course, there is also another website called Google Datasets. So this is also available, which basically contains huge quantity of data. Say, for example, I want to know how many I belong to a small city over here, tier 2 city called Salem. And in my Salem district, I want to know how many male are there and how many female are there. And in this male, how many are educated, how many are not educated. Similarly, in female also, I want to know. And I want to see, I want to map, I want to understand if there is a male who is educated, how is his behavior? If there is a female who is educated, how is her behavior? I think the problem, this is what you call it as a problem definition or objective definition. Okay, so I've defined the objective. I've defined the objective as I want to understand what is the behavior, or let us put it in this way, based on Swachh Bharat Abhiyan concept, the utilization of toilets. So if there is a male who is educated, does he use a toilet, a closed toilet? And then if there is a female who is educated, does she use a closed toilet under this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan? So I want to do an analysis. This is what you call it as defining the objective. So I've defined an objective. Now what is that I want? I want data. So what do? I go to the Salem Collectorate and I request for data. So what data will be they having? They will be having this data. How many male are there? How many female are there? And then in that male, how many are educated, not educated, female educated? Of course, they have the census data. And then this you have to do. This is one part which we have to do with the people. So I go identify male who is educated and ask him whether he is utilizing a closed toilet. I go identify the female not educated whether he is using a closed toilet. This is what they term in statistics as surveying. This is what they term it as surveying, and this is also sometimes termed as primary data collection. This is also sometimes termed as primary data collection. Now, so you do this activity and then finally you get to a conclusion. Yes, this is what I infer from this study. You get an inference and you present. After that, what do you do to the data? So I spend a lot of time. I want everybody to understand how this works. So what I do is I take this content, this entire data, and feed it to Kaggle. Give it free of cost. There's no charge. Why should I charge? It's my effort. Let everybody enjoy the effort. Nothing wrong. So I feed it in Kaggle. So I go and sit in Kaggle. I go open Kaggle and search whether this data is there. Yes, this data is available. This data is available. Okay. So that is fine. Now, once again, suppose I want it the other way. I have this data. So this is what I call it as cleaned data. Whatever is needed is immediately available. That is what I call it as clean data. But sometimes it so happens that you don't get a clean data. You don't get a clean data. You have to sit down and clean. Or in other words, let me make it the other way so that you understand. Suppose I go to the Salem Collectorate and I ask for the census. He says, yes, I have the census, but I have it in a different way, but not in the way you are asking. I have male, female, I have male and female, and I also have how many are educated, how many are not educated. Okay, and then I also have the age group too. I also have the age group too. Now, this data is not required for me. I am focused only on how many educated males are using the toilet. I'm not interested in this age group. I'm not interested in this age group. So you have to remove that data. So with age group, it is called as non-cleaned data. With age group, it is called as non-cleaned data. And you remove that age group and then you do a surveying and then finally you get the clean data. This is what is mentioned over here as data cleaning. It doesn't mean that any data set that you have, you can start using it immediately. You have to first clean the data. This is a very, 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 very big task because it is not so easy to get what data you want. Okay. Say, for example, you go to Kaggle and search, you find something like usage of Swiggy. I think we have stopped using Swiggy since March. Suppose I want to understand in Salem district, how many people are using Swiggy? So you go to Swiggy and ask him the data. He has the data. He has everything, the coordinates. He has the coordinates. He has the address. He has the phone number. He also has what I have eaten to. I have ordered for idli, dosa, vada, puri, everything, every nonsense he has. So you have to clean the data. What is that you want? You want to know how, in which locality more people are using Swiggy. So you don't need phone number, what I've eaten, nonsense, all these things are not required. I want just the address at the max. Suppose if I'm going to look at Google Maps and understand, I will be requiring the coordinates. That's it. Okay. So data cleaning is a very, very important task. Without doing this data cleaning, you will not be able to understand as what data you're going to work on. Okay. So this is the first step. And of course, the first step is collecting the data set and ensuring whether the data is clean or not. The next step is once you have the data, you should understand like what feature are you going to exploit. Now, say for example, I mean, let me draw something over here and immediately you will say what it is. I mean, based on some particular stuff, you will say what it is. Of course, I'm not a good artist. Yeah. Based on the figure that I've drawn, I think it looks like an elephant. Looks like an elephant. I think most of you will appreciate, yes, it looks like an elephant. what are the features? What are the features for an elephant? The features of the elephant is you have a long trunk, a very large body, you have a small eye. These are all features. Okay, so these are all features for human to understand what all these things are. But a computer does not understand. Looking at this, if you give this to a computer and ask what it is, it will not give you an answer. It does not know what it is. So for the computer, you have to give the features as numbers. You have to give the features as numbers, because that is the only way you can store the content in the computer. Right from the day we started learning or we started reading about computers, we always do the same way. Binary numbers, it stores in the form of binary numbers, hexadecimal numbers, and all these things. So you have to decide as what kind of feature you are going to extract. And then once this feature is extracted, you have a model or you have a black box. You have a black box and you give all these contents to the black box, and the black box gets trained. Black box gets trained. In a simpler way to understand, or in a simpler way to appreciate, how did we teach A for our kids? We always had a feature, A for apple. We showed the apple and then we told the kid A for apple. So this is a feature. Okay. So now the moment the kid always looks at the apple, what would the kid say? A for apple. Okay. So same thing, the feature that we have extracted, we feed it to the black box, and then we train the black box in such a way that after some time, say for example, all the features are fed and then trained, and at one particular point, when I feed the data set, it will start giving me the output. Okay, evaluation, that is what you do. So LKG kid is taught A for apple, B for boy whole year, and then at the end of the full year, a test is kept. The kid is shown an apple, and then the kid responds A for apple. So you should evaluate whether whatever you have done is correct or not. The evaluation is equally important. Okay, so this is how any model works, whether it be your machine learning or deep learning. Of course, in deep learning and machine learning, as I mentioned, there's a small change which we will appreciate once we understand the entire session. Okay, right. Yeah. So the main idea, or why do we require machine learning, is very simple. And the main idea is we want to infer, or we want to estimate. We want to estimate, and of course optimize also equally important. Just because I am developing a machine learning algorithm to find out whether it is a dog or a cat, I should not take a big size of a room, a computer of course of the size of a room. That should be done on my small iPad or small laptop that I have. Okay, so optimization is equally important. And of course, the size of the algorithm too. It should not be a very big algorithm. It should be a small algorithm. I still remember a small joke over here. A few days ago, when I was talking to one of my students, I asked him whether you have used a deep learning approach in your algorithm. Of course, he was doing a project under me, and the boy answered, "Yes, sir, I have used a deep learning algorithm." I was interested and I asked the boy, "What deep learning algorithm have you used?" Then he was a bit hesitant. He did not speak for some time. And then he said, "Sir, the code is about 2000 lines, sir. Then it must be surely a deep learning algorithm." I was stunned. I was amazed to hear this. I asked him, "How do you say a 2000 line program is a deep learning algorithm?" Never. I don't know how many of you have tried using MATLAB, and how many of you have tried using GoogleNet using MATLAB. It is hardly an 8-line code, which will respond to you enormously, beautifully. It will respond to you with a camera. You show a pen, it will say it is a pen. You show a mobile phone, it will say it is a mobile phone. Beautifully, it will respond. So I started questioning, like, how do you infer Or how did you come to a conclusion just because it is 2000 lines, it is a deep learning algorithm? No, it cannot be. So optimization is equally important. You should write your code in such a way that it is optimized. It takes minimum memory space, both for evaluation as well as for deployment. Okay. Yeah. So let us start with an example. Now I have the data. What is the data? I have an apple. I have an okay. I will leave it to you because you are listening to me. I want somebody. What is this? What can I say this? And what can I say this? You all know it. We use it daily. So what can I say this and what can I say this? The first one is of course red apple. Second one, can I say it as green apple? Or can I say it as some other name? Canterbury. Okay, let us have this as a red apple and let us have this as green apple. And of course, here I have a banana, which is a yellow banana. And here I have something called as a green banana. So this is my data, right? Now what I want, I have some more data. This is a sensor, and this is again another sensor. This is another switch. I have some more data. I want to classify all these. and understand. So how does the machine learning algorithms work? We broadly classify these machine learning algorithms into 3 different types. One is your unsupervised learning. Second one is your supervised learning, and third one is your reinforcement learning, which we have already encountered all these things in our life right from our kindergarten. Okay. So what do we do is, first thing that we do is we start developing the ground truth, or we first understand what we are actually looking at. So that is what I asked you. We first understand what the ground truth is. We label it. How did I label this one? I told this is a red apple. How did I tell you this one? I told this is a green apple. And this one as an yellow apple. And this as yellow banana, and this one as green. Right? But my question is my main problem is, it's not a question, it's my problem is, my computer cannot understand such lengthy terms. Red apple, green apple, yellow banana, green banana. It's very lengthy. So let me have names as A, B, C, D, and E. In that case, it is very small, and the content required for storing all these is also less. So that is why we have labeled each one as label 1, label 2, label 3, and label 4. Okay. So this is one of the first steps that we do in case of supervised learning. And of course, in any kind of learning, the first thing that we do is we label all the data. Okay. And then we find what are the attributes. Attributes in the sense features. As I told you in the previous few slides ago, we try to extract the features. What are the features that are available in this? This is red in color. This is green in color. This is yellow in color. This is green in color. So the first features that you are going to extract is color, right? And then of course there is a tie in the color. Both of these are green in color. Then there is a possibility the moment it looks at green color, immediately it will say that there is a confusion between whether it is a green apple or a green banana. Okay, so you have to extract one more feature. So let me take one more feature. Let me take the length. So if I take the length, then I understand that this is long, this is also long, but this is never long. Apples are never long. They are always round or they are always small. So length is one factor. This has a length, say for example X. This has a length for say example X. But this length is Y and this length is Y. There is a difference in the length. So now based on these two features, then you can start classifying whether this is different from the, I mean, these data is different from the others. Okay, so that is what we call it as features. And then you go to the learning model, and then you teach the model, just as we did right now. We teach the model and make it understand what it needs to do. Right? Okay, fine. Yeah. So these are simple examples that we have encountered in our day-to-day life. There's a teacher who teaches the class and also gives the supervision. This happens generally in any human being. This happens at the age of in our system, it starts from LKG to say up to 3rd or 4th standard. So what does the teacher do? The teacher has a notebook for every student, and then the teacher writes on the top 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and then the student is told to write. So what does the student do? The student starts writing it 10 times, right? So there is a supervision, and then the teacher checks whether he has written it correctly. Yes, he has written it correctly. And another simple example for this is the most ever-loving poem that we still, nursery rhyme that we still remember is Humpty Dumpty sat on a hall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and Humpty Dumpty broke his hip, if I am correct. I still, that is what I remember. Why that still remember in my memory? Because the teacher taught me repeatedly, and it, under her supervision, it is still under my mind. Okay, so that is what you call it as supervised learning. Unsupervised learning generally happens in anybody's life after 4th or 5th standard. After 5th standard, the teacher will teach. Say, for example, in 5th or 6th standard, in CBSE, as far as I am concerned, as far as I know, you have the atom model. The teacher teaches there is a proton, there is an electron standing outside. That's all. The teacher never says the student to write this 15 times. Never. So then that is one form of unsupervised learning or clustering. And you go and ask a 6th standard student, a normal 6th standard student, you ask whether this comes under physics or chemistry, he will very clearly say this is physics. He doesn't have that idea. He has clustered it. He has clustered it that this is physics. He doesn't have that idea, or he doesn't have that mapping this with chemistry. Of course, we know that this is a part of chemistry also, and this is a part of physics also. And of course, there's a bit of mathematics also in this. We know that, but that particular kid does not have that idea of clustering. So he has basically clustered. If you talk electron and proton, he will say that is in physics. And if you talk about the periodic table, immediately the kid will say it is in chemistry only. There is no periodic table in physics. That is what the kid will say. So they have the idea of clustering whatever they have studied, and that is what happens. And that generally happens starting from 5th standard up to, say, even sometimes up to 12th standard. Only after 12th standard you get that idea of mapping all these things, and starting your brain starts to work, how to work together. Of course, this is how the human brain works, and this is how the scientists have also planned to work on supervised and unsupervised learning. Right. Of course, as I told you, you have 2 steps. One is the learning phase, and then the testing phase. And then finally, you have to calculate the accuracy. Most of my students never do this. Even some of the research papers also, some normal research papers fail to do this. You have to calculate the accuracy of your system. You have to calculate how many number of correct classifications have been done divided by the total number of cases. Now, how do you know whether the system has classified correctly or not? That you have to sit down manually and see. You have 50 students in a class, and you conduct checks for all the 50 students. What do? You individually check whether the student has written correctly or not. That is how you have to do the classification or misclassification. You have to check the number of correct classification. That is the way you have to do. And of course, you know how many number of students are available already in your class. Then you calculate the accuracy. Right? Okay. Yeah. So this is how we generally do. We have a training data set. as I told you. Then you create the model, and then you tell it to find the patterns. It started clustering it out, and then you get different clusters. This is all squares, this is a hexagon, this is a circle or ellipse, and this is all rectangles, triangles, and then other polygons. Right. I think I've told you this. Right. So let me now come to the most important factor over here, which is the Navier-Bayes algorithm. The moment I tell about this, I think most of you will be very much worried. This guy has been talking already too much, and now he's talking. He's going to take one of the most what you call very toughest subject, you can say, or very uncertain subject, because already when we talk about probability, then we always think about uncertainty, and that is what it talks about too. How many of you know that this is the most simplest Bayes theorem, or the most simplest probability distribution approach? I mean, probability distribution approach, which was used for finding a spam filter or not till 2020. It's a very, very simple algorithm, very simple algorithm, which most of us know. But let me quickly tell you so that it is easy for you. Let me take up 1 minute. Okay. Let me take whiteboard and let us do a small math. If you have a paper, you can always do it along with me. Nothing wrong. Otherwise, you can just watch the screen and understand. It's a very simple, basic mathematics that most of us would have already experienced in our life, but we never looked at the mathematics behind it. That's it. I hope the white screen is visible to you. I will be writing on the screen so that you will understand what I wanted to try to explain. Should I pause for some time, or you feel too much bombarded? I think that feedback would be of great help to me. I would like to listen from the participants also. Have I bombarded too much? You want a pause?
No, sir, you can absolutely go ahead with the explanation and mathematics behind it.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, I think the screen is visible right now with lines and other things. So let me take an example. Let me take bananas, and then let me take apples, and let me take oranges too. Okay, so I want to take up some features. Okay, green color. Oh, sorry, green color, and then I have red color, and then I have yellow color. So this is a color feature. Okay, do we have green apples? I mean green bananas? Yes, we have green bananas. So let me quantify. Suppose I have some 100 green. Do we have a red banana? Yeah, we do have a red banana. Down in south we have red banana. So let me have some 50 red bananas. Do we have an yellow banana? Yes, we have an yellow banana. Let me quantify. I have 150 yellow bananas. On a whole, how much would be the total? It would be 100, 150, 300 total. Okay. So first, let me take this part alone. Let me not go to apples and oranges as of now. Now, I want to know what is the probability that if I choose a banana, what is the probability that if I choose a banana, it is a red banana. So what will you do? You have to first, or let us do it this way. Let us not do this first. Let us do it this way. I want to know the number of, or the probability of green bananas, which we generally do it this way, 100 by 300, which is equal to 0.33. And then probability of red bananas. Probability is nothing but you have a group and then you are going to choose one from it. Then what is the probability that it will be a red banana? So if it is red, then 50 by 300, which will be equal to 0.166. Okay, and then probability of yellow banana. What does it say? How much is that? 150. Okay. So I say it is 150 divided by 300, which is equal to 0.5. Okay, right. Okay. Now, once again, let me come back to apples. Now, when it was only one column or one row of information, it was very easy. Now, let me add one more column. So I say that apples, green apples, say I have 100. And then red apples, I say I have another 150. I don't have yellow apples. There are no yellow apples to the best of my knowledge. So let us have it as 0, then it is totally 250. Now, again, you can do the same task. You want to find out what is the probability of green apples. Then it is 100 by 300. 100 by 250. 100 by 250, which is equal to 0.4. Probability of red apples, 150 by 250, which is equal to 0.6. And of course, you don't have probability of yellow apples, so it is 0. Now, suppose I mix all these together, banana, apples, everything together. Banana and apples, everything together. Now what happens? You are going to randomly pick something and you want to know whether it is a banana, and whether it is green. You know this. You have already done this in the smaller classes. You have done this and you know that there comes your Navier Bayes theorem. Now look at this. You will quickly remember what you have studied in your smaller classes. This is what you have studied in this one. Probability of A upon B is equal to probability of B upon A into probability of A divided by probability of B, which is your Navier Bayes theorem or your Bayes theorem. This basically helps them to identify whether a given mail is a spam filter or not. So if a mail is sent from one sender 672 times, then it means that it is a spam. That is how we do it, right? And then if it is sent only 13 times, then it means that it is not a spam. Okay. This we have also experienced in our own life. Like we start sending bulk emails to somebody, and after some time you call a person and ask, I sent you an email, did you get it? The person will say, I did not get it. Then we will say, check, I sent it. You go and check in your junk mail. Then the person will say, go and check in the junk mail and say, yeah, I found your email. So immediately you will ask, how did it go to the junk? I sent you in the correct way only. How did it go? Because your Navier Bayes theorem works over there. You started sending bulk emails. The system got suspicious over you and it put all that information. Of course, it did not reject you. It put that information in the junk. Or in other ways, to make you all quickly understand, daily morning we get the newspaper at our home. Along with the newspaper, we get some advertisements or clippings. So what do? You first put all the clippings outside and just take the paper inside. Okay, that is what you call it as a spam filter. That is what you call it as a spam filter. Okay. All right. This is a simple example which has been almost implemented in India. I don't know whether if some of you have applied for loan. So what he will ask is, the first thing is he will ask for what is your PAN number. And then once you give the PAN number, you get something called as the CIBIL score. How was this calculated? Simple. Your PAN number is already available. And then your PAN number tells whether you have paid your loan in the right time or not. So now, based on, if you have paid all your loans in the correct time, then automatically your CIBIL score will be too high, and then you are approved for a loan. So what does it say? Based on the past information that you have paid all your loans correctly, in future also you will pay all your loans correctly. Right? Say for example, I have a credit card. Every month I get a bill. Okay, credit card is again a loan. I get a bill, and my bill needs to be paid on the 6th. Suppose you start writing a algorithm. Suppose I pay my bill 6th or before. I give a 1. I pay my bill after 6th. Then I give a 0. So now you have two values, 1 and 0. Calculate how many 1s are there, how many 0s are there in a month, in a year. Suppose there are 12 1s, then it means that you are a good payer. Suppose there are 12 zeros, then it means you are a very, very bad payer. Simple logic. Of course, there are other logics behind it. I'm just giving you a very brief idea of how it has been implemented in our day-to-day life. Okay. So based on PAN number, you can get your CIBIL score, and the CIBIL score is based on this rating. Of course, if you have interest and other things, all these things are to be looked on. There are a lot of other parameters too, but I've just given you a very, very basic idea of what actually has happened. Yeah. So I have labeled all the data, and then you give it to the model or predictor, and then the predictor, first the model is trained, and then after some time you feed this, the predicted label comes outside. What is the predicted label for this? It is yellow apple. Okay, right. This is very, very important, which most of us do not calculate in our papers, research papers. Whenever we look at a research paper, the first thing that we look is how much is the error. Okay, how do you calculate the error? You know that this is an yellow apple. Your machine says this is a red apple. Then it means that it is a wrong perception, which means false. Right? Question is to write about supervised learning, and the student writes about how a goat is, then that is a wrong answer. Okay. So what is the targeted output, and what is the actual output that you have got? Suppose my targeted output is say 100, and my actual output is about say 90. Then my error is only 10, which is okay. You put it as a percentage, it is 10%. Okay, acceptable. But again, you have to try to reduce this to at least 0.5%. Then it means that your machine is really good. Okay, fine. So this is very, very important to calculate. Of course, this we generally do it manually. Nowadays, we have small tools available, small lines of coding, which you feed it to the system, which will immediately calculate the error. Right. This is one important point that I wanted to mention, which is your regression. This we have done it in our smaller classes, but we forgot. When we were in the 12th standard state board, that we had mathematics second paper wherein the teacher used to give x and y values, say 10, 15, 12, 22, all these values, and then immediately we used to calculate x minus. First you list down what is x, find out mean of x, and then x minus x bar, list down y, find out the mean of y minus y bar. You do all these activities, and then the teacher would have taught you a formula. Y is equal to, you put all these calculated values over here, and finally you will be getting y is equal to mx plus c, something like this. And then with that it gets stopped. The teacher never tells you to plot because of many reasons, but actually what happens is when you basically try to plot, you get a straight line, right? Something like what you find it over here on the screen. Okay, but this is how we have looked at mathematics, but actually data scientists have looked at it in a different sense. It's not only data scientists, most of the other scientists have also looked at it in a different sense, that there is one class over here and there is other class over here. Class in the sense these are all one set and this is another set. Now suppose I plot a point over here and I ask whether it is in class 1 or class 2. Immediately looking at the figure, because there is a demarcation line which is far away from here, then immediately you say that it is under class 2. Okay, this is one of the major machine learning approach which has been widely used in most of the applications. And of course, your Hey Google works on regression. They call it as ridge regression or a rigid regression with a different terminology. The basic concept behind that is Hey Google. Unless otherwise you say Hey Google, it does not open up. You say only Google also, it never opens up. Okay, so unless otherwise you say that, it doesn't open, and then after that it starts listening. So it is a class of regression. So no Hey Google, it is down here. Hey Google, it is up here in the different class. Okay, so this is how most of your stuffs work. Yeah, there is a lot of difference between classification and regression. Let us not now enter into it. Classification problems, I have listed it out: face recognition, character recognition, spam detection. Of course, spam detection we saw. Biometric recognition also, we use a lot of face, iris signature, etc. Face recognition, character recognition, I think so. Character, but this was my part of PhD. It was a very interesting topic. And this is what runs the entire globe. The Bullion, National Stock Exchange, what you call the Bombay Stock Exchange, and other things. They give you a prediction as what actually happens. Of course, pandemic has made everything out. Epidemiology, what we are facing right now. Car, plane, navigation, angle of steel variation, all these things can be predicted. Temporal trends, weather over time, how will be the weather, all these things can be predicted. Of course, this Google uses this approach, and it gives you the ranking on, because when you give the term machine learning, the first thing that comes is Wikipedia. How does it do? Because the ranking for this is high, then Stanford, then Coursera, and then ML, CMU, and then MIT. But if you ask a teacher like me on machine learning and deep learning, if you ask me, I will say you go for machine learning for MIT. But Google does not list to that first. People who chose machine learning to understand first read only this. So you give basically you try to give a ranking for each one of them. Yeah, this happens. This is a very common approach which happens even nowadays. You go to Google and start searching for something. Say for example, I want to buy an iPad. Okay, I go to Google, type iPad, and then start searching. You search for about 20 to 15 minutes, and then you switch it off, leave it, and ensure that when you search in Google, you have signed up. That is equally important. You have used your Google account, Gmail account, and you have signed. And after some time, you go and open Facebook. You will find advertisements coming in between for different kinds of iPads. How did the Facebook know that I'm looking for looking for an iPad. Of course, Facebook is a different company, Google is a different company. How did it come to know? It's because of ranking. You were searching for in Google, and then the machine understood that you are going to purchase an iPad. Now, any social media, it will give the information that you are searching for an iPad. Okay, so this is how it works out. Yeah, unsupervised learning. I'll give you a simple example so that it quickly understand. Yeah, this is the best example. Now, what happens is you have this data, input data, and then you have this input data, and then you feed this to the machine. Okay, the machine is going to have an algorithm. Now that algorithm, of course, you need to write it. You write the algorithm and feed it to the system, and then after some time, the algorithm extracts the features. Algorithm extracts the feature. You are not going to define that extract this feature, extract this feature. You are not going to define anything. You are just going to write the algorithm, and the algorithm is going to extract the features. And then after processing, you will be clustering it. There's no labeling. Please do keep this point in mind. In unsupervised learning, you will not get any labeling. Just clusters. All these red dots, one circle, green dot, one circle, purple dots, one circle. So you don't get it labeled properly. This is one. You can say this is one feature of unsupervised. Say in this also, you have a raw data of apples, bananas, and mangoes. You start feeding it, and the algorithm starts working out just clusters, all bananas together, all apples together, all mangoes together. That's all. It will not label it as this is apple, this is banana, and this is mango. Unsupervised learning does not do that. Okay. This is what happens if you give to a kid. You go and give to a kid some clusters. We have done this even in our smaller ages. You have, say for example, you have some drawing like this, and then the drawing is basically split haphazardly, cut down into haphazard way, and then you give it to the kid. The kid will try to mingle it up. Okay, the kid does not know what it is inside. It will just try to mingle it up, and finally you will be getting back your image like this. Okay, so only after it does it, it will say, there are apples here, there are mangoes here, there are, only after doing it. Okay, that intelligence comes up only after that. Right. Yeah, some of the applications are the customer segmentation. This is very, very important stuff that nowadays most of the stores are doing. How many of you use organic products? How many of you use non-organic products? How many are meat eating? How many are not meat eating? I mean, vegetarians and non-vegetarians. How many are eggetarians? Amazon knows what you look at. Amazon, take my case, I will look at, I have my own perspective. I will be looking at stuff that are equally weighted and other stuff. I will not be looking at fashionable products. I don't have passion over fashion, so I don't look at fashionable products. So my customers grouping happens a lot over here. So this is widely used nowadays, and image compression also it is used nowadays widely, and bioinformatics also it is used nowadays. So what have you understood? So this is the main idea. In case of your supervised learning, you teach the model, show the data, this is apple, and say these are apples. This is what happened in your KG class. And then after some time you ask what is this, then the system says this is an apple. Okay. And then after you were in your 6th or 7th class, the teacher will just show you a cluster of data, and then you start modeling. This all belongs to physics, this all belongs to chemistry, this all belongs to geography. We do not have that capability of interrelating. That's a different concept, but we understood that this is physics, this is chemistry, and this is so this is one way of unsupervised learning that has happened in our life, right? Okay. And this is very, very important. This is what we do to most of our kids right now in our colleges too. Reinforcement learning. Okay. So what do? You give some input. Let me give you a simple example. Seminar that we do in our class. Seminar is a pedagogy method of teaching wherein you tell one particular student, tomorrow you should take this topic. So what have you given? You have given an input that you have to do this. That topic the particular student would have not studied. Okay. So what happens? The student goes, reinforces himself or herself and tries to understand. And of course, while you are giving the seminar itself, you say if you finish the seminar, 5 marks for your internals. So immediately the student will be happy. You have prepared the reward. This is equally important. Reward. And the next day student comes, presents it. After a reinforcement system of learning, the student presents it. And then you looking at how the student presents, you give an evaluation, 4 or 3 or 2, whatever is required, you give it to the student. Okay. So this is what we call it as reinforcement learning. And this same procedure is used in your machine also, but the reward system is not on the basis of marks that I have given you, but based on evaluation. So you feed this input to the system. Okay, you look at what the response is. It says it is a mango. Then you give a feedback. That is, you have evaluated and you give it wrong. It is an apple. Then it learns. Then it is noted. Then once again you feed the input as apple. It understands and it says it's an apple. It's almost the same concept under which your deep learning is currently working. Almost the same concept. Okay. So reinforcement learning is like you are forcing the system to understand, and the system also does a two-way learning. This is one of the best examples for two-way learning. I mean, your reinforcement learning. We also call this as decision tree. I think if some of you have studied data structure, you will appreciate this terminology of decision tree, wherein we have all played this tic-tac-toe game in our smaller ages. So we start with X, and then the other person puts on 0, and then it goes on. The moment we come to this stage, or to this stage, we will be able to identify whether the game will be won or lost. So we can predict. So all those decisions, we are trying to put it in the form of a tree. So finally, if you have this chart alone with you, and then you start playing, the moment you come to the 3rd or 4th level, you can say who is going to win and who is going to lose. Right? So this is some form of reinforcement. You already have the result in hand and you are testing and seeing whether it works or not. Okay. So what was that? Yeah. So you will also be able to predict if there is any mistake that happens. That is what is given over here. Assume an imperfect opponent, he or she sometimes make a mistake. You will be able to immediately identify with this chart. You have a flow chart or the flow tree in which it works out, and then you start working on it. Okay, right. So we have basically looked at 3 different types of machine learning: supervised machine learning, unsupervised machine learning, and reinforcement machine learning. And we have I've basically tried to give you a glimpse of, or give you a feel of what actually these 3 different types of learnings are. Yeah, as I told you, there are a lot of research opportunities available. In the beginning of the session, I told nobody works on this data analysis. To somebody works. Data cleaning and database collection, very few of us work. And that's one of the best and good areas wherein you can get a lot of output over there. And then Multiple parameter analysis is one area which most of us are working, and complex data analysis, decision support systems, all these are different areas where most of us are trying to work and understand. I think I'm done, and I'm open for questions if there are any.
Participants, if you have any queries, you can unmute and ask.
Sir, one query is, can you give journal names on algorithm development?
Yeah, Sriveni, yeah, can you give journal names on algorithm development? That's a really a good question, but that's too generic, because it's very difficult to specify a particular name, particular journal name and algorithm, because even the algorithms depend on the applications, right? So it's like whether you're going to use it for image processing, or whether you're going to use it for signal processing, or you're just going to use it for even data science. So, however, I can just give you some very quick references. Algorithms itself is a journal. It's an MDPI journal. And then the IEEE transactions on evolutional algorithm, journal on graph theory, algorithmica, ACM transactions on algorithms, information processing letters. All these are different algorithms. There's one more question. I hope I've answered you, Sriveni. Reinforcement learning is applicable to which kind of application? Can you tell one real-time application? Thank you, Dinesh Kumar. Reinforcement application, I'll give you an example. Reinforcement algorithm, you want an example? I'll answer you, Dinesh. Just give me some time. Let me quickly recall. In the meantime, let me answer Mr. Tyagarajan. Suggest some DL algorithm for range seek removal from real-time video sequences and deep learning framework for that. Deep learning. Sir, to answer this question, the first point that we need to keep in mind is we should first understand what is the size of the video frame. Now, each video, for 1 second, we generally have 25 frames. What is the size of each frame? So that is the first point we need to keep in mind. The second point that you need to keep in mind is, if there is one particular frame, what is the window size that you're going to implement on the frame? Okay, that is the second point that you need, because if it is a 2345 cross 4625 size of frame, you cannot directly feed that frame to the deep learning network. You have to choose a small window, and then from that window, you have to start you have the concept of windowing. I think most of us understand what is windowing. So you do the concept of windowing over the entire frame, and then you do the analysis. So this is the first understanding that we need to keep in mind. Second understanding, because it is a video frame, you will require a lot of computing facility. So you can either do it two ways. One, you use a GPU, which is mostly available in most of our computers. Any quad-core processor has a GPU. Okay, that is the first thing. Or we need not go for a quad-core too. Suppose you have a P1 or P4 processor. P4 too has 2 or 3 more processors. Then you can do it on the concept of cluster computing. Cluster computing is very simple. Like you make the first computer do for the first frame, second computer do it for the second frame, third computer for the third frame, goes on. So if you have 4 to 5 computers, you can quickly do this. So this is the second point that you need to keep in mind. Third point is like what kind of algorithm? That was your question that you have asked. To remove range tricks from real-time video sequence and deep learning framework. Deep learning framework, that depends on how many range tricks are there. Suppose you are going to take the maximum case, then you should be using an ReLU. ReLU is having something around 30, 40, 35 different layers and even more. Now, you have to customize those layers. You have to customize those layers before actually implementing. You have to tell you like what algorithm, rather than telling you what algorithm, you have to decide on what is the convolution function that you should be using on each of these layers. Forget the input layer and the output layer. In between the layers, you have number of convolution layers which do a kind of back propagation, coming forth and back each and every time. So you have to decide as what is the convolution function that you will be using in such a way that you get in such a way that you understand, the system, the model understands and then extracts the information. Okay, so there's no specific algorithm that I can suggest, because I doubt if there is any specific algorithm. The development of the algorithm in any deep learning approach basically is on developing the convolution function and changing the convolution function. Okay, so I hope I have given you the right answer. At least convince you with the answer. Let me again come back to Dinesh. Reinforcement learning example. Are you expecting a technical example or a real life example? You want a real time example? Okay, real time example is okay. Suppose you are planning to study medicine. Suppose you're planning to study medicine and you have already completed engineering. Now you want to go and study medicine. So what happens is the teacher over there understands that you know some amount of information about medicine. We all know what a paracetamol is, what is an anti-analgesic, what is an antiseptic, all these basic ideas we know. So you go to the, to a medical college, you join, but the professor knows that you are already an engineering graduate. So now what he does is, he shows you some part of the body and he asks you what is this. So you will immediately say this might be this part. Then he corrects you. No, this is not this part. This is this part. So this is one real-time example that I can give you, but I really haven't experienced this in my life, because I personally do a lot of unsupervised learning. I haven't experienced this reinforced learning in my life. I really do not know. I hope I have convinced you, Dinesh Kumar. And Siveni Duba, I think Siveni Duba, image processing or data science. I did not get the question. Please, can you please repeat? Can you give? Okay, your question is related to, can you give a journal name on algorithm development, image processing or data science? That would be your question, if I am correct.
Thank you. You gave me the journal name.
No, ma'am, I did not get you. Can you please repeat it?
You already gave me the answer, sir. You gave me the journal names related to the algorithms.
Thank you.
That was my question.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
You asked me related to which area.
So then I told either in image processing or in related to deep data science.
Right. Okay.
Any more questions, participants? If there is no question, then we can conclude.
One minute, ma'am. Many convolution layers will affect the accuracy of the system. This is the problem of optimization. Now, how many layers should you have is defined by the optimization solution. We have done this in our engineering education. We have learned about Lagrange polynomials, and we have also implemented these Lagrange polynomials and Lagrange optimization, which we call it as L1, L2, L3, L4 levels of optimization. So that basically any system that you do, then you do an optimization and understand whether your system is optimal. So how many convolution, if there are more convolution layers, but even then the system is optimal, you have to leave it. You cannot once again do a two-level optimization. It would be overfitting. We don't want an overfitting or an underfitting curve or an underfitting optimization to be done. We want to normally optimize the solution. So there's no limit. There's no limit. The solution, the limit will be given by the optimization. Solution or the limit, how many layers you want, will be given once you perform the optimization on the algorithm.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your informative session. And participants, we'll start the next session by 11:30. Thank you.